Hello and welcome back to coverage of the Apex Gaming $5,000 Modern Open here in sunny Caldwell, Ohio. I'm Todd Tandy Anderson, joined by Elliot Raff. Say hi, Elliot.
Hi, Elliot.
We are into round 7, the last round of Swiss before we find our final 8 competitors battling it out for their fair share of $5,000 in cash and prizes and invitations to the regional championship as well as the Apex Invitational next month. This round, we're going to be watching two people we've seen so far today, but a matchup we haven't seen in quite some time. We're going to be watching Deshaun Johnson on Boros face down Josh Moscow on Amulet Titan. Let's start with Josh Moscow's side of things. Ellie, give us a rundown on this build and how you think it's going to play out in the Boros matchup.
Yeah, so this is a matchup that Amulet loves to see. Amulet is looking to go over the top of these more fair creature decks, whereas Boros, is has a lot of dead cards in the matchup. Their spot removal isn't killing a Primeval Titan. You're going to have to point your discharges at Arboreal Grazers, not necessarily
Yeah.
the targets that you want to find. And Amulet Titan's able to go over the top of them very easily. That said, Deshaun Johnson does have 2 copies of Blood Moon in the main deck. That is one of the best cards that he could possibly have, and potentially could have, a turn 1 Ragavan, turn 2 Blood Moon situation. That's what he's going to be looking to do.
Yeah, I think that, this is a matchup that was very common like a year ago, and it was because Amulet Titan was gaining popularity to prey on Boros Energy. But even in those days, Boros Energy has the turn 1 Ragavan, turn 2 Blood Moon. That's lights out on the play most of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And, an aspect that's become more prominent of the Amulet deck is this reliance on the Aftermath Analyst loop, which is the end stage of the Scape Shift loops,
Yeah.
right? Deshaun Johnson, has a couple copies of Thraben Charm, could potentially use those as some graveyard hate to exile mid combo if that becomes available.
Yeah, 2 main deck copies of Thraben Charm. Those also destroy target enchantment, which Urza Saga is an enchantment land, so we could use that early to disrupt the mana.
Yeah, plus that does deal with spelunking as well, in case
Right.
that's the piece that Josh is leaning on.
All right, well, that's the matchup. This is a win in. Deshaun Johnson versus Josh Moscow, Boros versus Amulet Titan. Let's head on down for the last match of the Swiss. All right. Players here just about ready to go. Nice little friendly handshake to start it off. Deshaun with Ragavan. Step 1. There's a saga for Moscow into Amulet of Vigor. Step 1 for both sides.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see here. Does Deshaun have the turn 2 Blood Moon? He's moving very quickly. Green Sun Zenith going to be the reveal off of the Ragavan. Not one that Deshaun's going to be looking for, is he doesn't have any green creatures in his deck.
Maybe one day. Maybe one day they'll make a green-white hybrid version of Ocelot Pride that I'll be able to find off my opponent's Green Sun Zenith. Here is Thraben Charm going to blow up the Urza Saga. Doesn't play a second land, though, and going to pass it back to Moscow. Already has an Amulet of Vigor in play, though, so this could be fireworks.
All right, we'll see what Josh does opt to do here. Looks like it's going to be a Simic Girth Chamber as the land, floating 2 mana, and a Zenith for 1. That's going to be an Arboreal Grazer that will be entering the battlefield. He puts up a roadblock against that Ragavan,
Yeah.
as well as lets Josh redeploy another land here. We'll see what one that will be when the Grazer trigger resolves.
Okay, and we're going to go for Forest. That way we don't have to just return the land. We didn't have anything to do with that 2 mana. We're going to try to go again over the next few turns. Deshaun untaps, has Galvanic Discharge for the Arboreal Grazer. Going to knock it off, get a treasure, attack for 2 again. Finds, I think, Escape Shift. That one's not doing anything, but here comes Guide of Souls off of the treasure token, and that's going to add a lot more pressure over the next few turns.
Yeah, we'll see what Josh does have. We know he has access to at least 3 mana this turn, thanks to that bounce land that's still in hand. And it looks like it's just going to be a Force and a Malevolent Rumble here for Josh Moscow.
I'm interested to see how this deck evolves over time. I know that Canister, one of the people who played this deck and really put it on the map a few years ago, he is currently playing 4 copies of Explore in his build, or was last weekend. The Pro Tour, I think Rumble had a higher win percentage than Explore, and so now people are moving towards Rumble.
Yeah, much higher win percentage. I think that was primarily from the Sanctum of All contingent that brought Amulet Titan with Malevolent Rumble, and the numbers really bore out Rumble having a much higher win percentage. You did see Josh Moscow take a second copy of Amulet of Vigor off of that Malevolent Rumble while choosing to bin a Primeval Titan, and that's got a signal to Deshaun there's already access to a Titan for Josh Moscow.
Okay, Deshaun does find land number 2. That's Windswept Heath. Going to play it before attacking in with these two creatures. Moscow chooses not to block. And treasure token created, Spelunking exiled. Unlikely to play the Spelunking, I would imagine, but we'll see if Deshaun has something else to do with his mana here. Going to play Ocelot Pride. This is going to start spreading around a bit as we gain an energy and we go wide and start making 1/1 tokens. Cracks Windswept Heath, and let's see what he's got here with this last land.
Yeah, I mean, if he doesn't have another relevant play here, this is going to be a Primeval Titan for Josh Moscow next turn. Just using the information that Deshaun already has, he knows there's a second copy of Amulet of Vigor and a Bounce Land. That plus the Eldrazi spawn adds up to 6 mana. So we'll see if Deshaun might actually use a removal spell to go after the spawn here. And that will be Goblin Bombardment coming down. He's going to make a cat in the end step off the Ocelot Pride, trigger the Guide of Souls again, going up to 19 and 2 energy. And we'll see, yeah, he is
Bang.
going to use that cat to clear the spawn, perhaps delaying Titan for another turn.
Okay, back to Moscow. Draws for turn. Let's see how we operate. Here is Amulet of Vigor number 2. We know that's when the money starts. Here's Bounce Land that's going to float 4 mana, returns it to hand. Has 5 currently at his disposal.
I think there's a Spelunking coming down, and that is going to be the Spelunking, and that's going to be enough mana for this Primeval Titan. Picked up an Arboreal Grazer as well, so there's going to be all the mana in the world available to Josh Moscow this turn, and this might just be game here.
Yeah,
with
I
the
mean,
Onweir Battlements already in the graveyard.
I think the Arboreal Grazer can definitely change the math in some of these spots, but I think when you get 2 Amulet of Vigor and you resolve a Primeval Titan, it's usually lights out. I don't know exactly what happens. You know, someone can explain it to me and my eyes would glaze over. And then all of a sudden you're dead. Like, okay, man, just say you're dead.
Yeah, this is going to be a few copies of Primeval Titan at the very least. So what's going to happen here? We have Lotus Field floating 6 mana. And the mirror pool using, because we have double amulet, floats a colorless for its own activated ability. So the mirror pool is going to activate in response to the Lotus Field sacrifice trigger. It's going to make another copy of Primeval Titan, and Josh is off to the races here. This next copy is likely going to be a copy of Echoing Deeps, which will copy the mirror pool, as well as a second Lotus Field.
Okay, and now once that happens, how do we go infinite from here, Ella? Give me that explanation so I can stop thinking about it.
Yeah, so eventually what's going to happen is Josh will have enough mana floating to the point where he can get Teleria West and a bounce land here.
Okay.
And then he'll transmute the Teleria West to find Aftermath Analyst, and that'll return all of these lands from the graveyard to the battlefield, make a couple of more Primeval Titans. One of those will grab Shifting Woodland, and he'll be able to make infinite copies of Primeval Titan, and then start the loop where he'll be able to copy the Hanweir Battlements that's already in his graveyard, haste them all, and attack.
Okay, so we do find Talaria West and Semi-Growth Chamber. We're going to float a bunch of blue and green off of those. And then when all of this is said and done, the 2 Lotus Fields will resolve, the Semi-Growth Chamber will resolve, and that'll be 5 lands that have to leave.
Yeah, I
So-
think we actually did this a little out of order.
Yeah, I think we're just shortcutting as Moscow.
Yeah.
But yes, I agree. There should be 5 lands not in play for Moscow at that point. But Deshaun Johnson says the writing's on the wall. We're going to pack it in, and game 1 goes to Moscow. All right, as we move into the sideboard games, we're going to take a look at these players' sideboards, talk a little bit about how the matchup's going to play out. I'll start with Deshaun Johnson on the Boros side of things. We have 1 copy of Blood Moon to complement the 2 in the main, 2 Celestial Purge, 2 Clarion Conqueror, 2 Orm's Chant, 2 Rest in Peace, 2 Surgical Extraction, 2 Wear Terror, and 2 Wrath of the Skies. Elliot, I want to posit a question to you. Since we did just lose to the card Aftermath Analyst, right, going infinite, is there a world where we want Surgical Extraction and Rest in Peace in this matchup? Is that the kind of game plan we want to fight?
It very well might have to be. I don't think you're going to want to overboard here, so I don't think you're going to want both Rest in Peace and Surgical Extraction, especially when I think Rest in Peace shuts off your own Flage as well, right?
Okay.
So it's you're certainly wanting to get onto the board early, but I'm not sure how much disruption Deshaun is going to want to bring in and take out a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
Um,
How do you feel about the card Orm's Chant against the Amulet Titan deck? They do have to attack a lot of times with the Titan, but there was no attack step that game.
Yeah, they certainly don't have to have the attack step. I think the silence mode is perhaps a little more appealing, but again, it's kind of how much can I really afford to take out of my deck that's pressuring my opponent here? It's you need to be able to clear off the arboreal grazers to have your Ragavans and Guides of Souls be able to get in. So it's I think this has to be a matchup where you have minimal sideboarding. You just kind of have to rely on these blood moons to buy you enough time. But I think these fables are cards that we could see come out. Flage certainly trimmed down in numbers as well for some of these more interactive pieces.
All right, on the other side of the table, tell me about Josh Moscow's sideboard and how you think he's going to approach his Boros matchup.
Yeah, so Josh has one copy of Vajuka Bog, 2 Collector Oof, 3 Dismember, 2 Force of Vigor, 1 Green Sun Zenith, 1 Ice Tool Explorer, 1 Pyroclasm, 2 Stock Up, and 2 Vexing Bauble. So the cards that I like here from Josh's side of things, definitely those 3 copies of Dismember, stem any early aggression. You definitely could see Force of Vigor come in as an answer to Blood Moon and Goblin Bombardment as well. Pyroclasm is the big prize here, being able to sweep up those wide battlefields. The other cards, not so much in terms of things that he might be looking towards, especially because I think the Scape Shift package is the most vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
So I expect the Scape Shifts to come out and for Josh to lean a little more heavily on the actual Primeval Titans.
All right, as these players are shuffling up here for game number 2, I'd like to take this time to thank our sponsors for Apex Con and these weekend's festivities. Once Upon a Galaxy is a sweet auto battler from the creators of Storybook Brawl and some great Magic minds like Luis Scott Vargas and Matt Nass. You can check out Once Upon a Galaxy in your mobile app store right now and play for free. It's also now available on Steam. Also sponsored by Moxfield.com. Moxfield's a great place to build and share deck lists with your friends. All of our deck lists, once we get into top 8, will be posted on Apex's Moxfield page. All right, players are just about ready here, so let's wait, see if they start the game or if we go to a mulligan. Moscow really tanking here. I think Deshaun kept very quickly.
Would it be possible to go down to the match your turn to get a little better view? All right, thanks very much. It looks like both players actually are going to be on the mulligan.
Okay, I was wrong. All right, so Josh Moscow up a game. He's going to be on the draw here. Deshaun looking for a turn 2 Blood Moon is ideal. What does Moscow have that can fight back against those Blood Moons now that we're in the post board?
Well, certainly the 3 Bane deck copies of Beseiju are the most important ones for Josh to have access to, and of course basic Forest going along with that to be able to activate them even post Blood Moon. And I did mention those Force of Vigors as well, options to take care of Blood Moon as well as Goblin Bombardment, and if Deshaun has left it in, Fable of the Mirror Breaker as well.
All right, well, it looks like both players are keeping. Going to put one card back on bottom.
And it looks like Deshaun Johnson did bring in Surgical Extraction. Saw that one in hand. Definitely could even be able to snipe a Titan, for instance, if one was milled off of a Malevolent Rumble. So we'll keep an eye out for that as an answer to what's going on on the Amulet side.
It's also not a permanent, so it doesn't get blown up by Beseiju or bounced by Otawara like a Rest in Peace could. Like, it's just not that reliable.
Yeah, and we do see Plains and a Guide of Souls here for Deshaun and Josh having a basic Forest into Amulet of Vigor.
All right, back to Deshaun on turn number 2. Both players insulating themselves from potential future Blood Moon. Guide of Souls, though, not going to ramp up like the Ragavan. And no play on turn number 2 for Deshaun. Going to pass it back to Moscow. Maybe a case of over sideboarding. Maybe just a weak mulligan. Maybe a handful of good 3-drops. We'll have to wait and see.
It could just be that Deshaun kept a more streamlined hand that's able to interact a little more, and we do see Malevolent Rumble, Force of Vigor, Summoner's Pact, Arboreal Grazer, and Urza Saga. Urza Saga going to be the take.
All right. Saga in hand, and going to be passing back to Deshaun here in just a moment.
And you kind of saw Deshaun give Josh's mills a little check after they were milled there. Honestly, if I'm Josh, that's a bit of a signal for me that that there might be a surgical extraction on the other side.
Yeah, it could be a tip. Gotta keep close to the vest as much as you can. Can't give away those little info leaks. But I mean, you gotta look.
Oh,
You gotta look to
absolutely.
make sure. All right, top card goes to the graveyard from Elegant Parlor. So Windswept Heath. We're gonna go back for turn number 3. Deshaun plays Arena of Glory. Has Fable of the Mirror Breaker. This is gonna come down and make a 2/2 Goblin. Let's get Fable of the Mirror Breaker on the screen. We haven't seen too much of this card lately, ever since it was banned in Standard and we stopped playing Pioneer. Uh, it's been left at basically just Modern, and it's kind of fallen off. I think Seasoned Pyromancer has stepped up in a lot of ways to take the place of Fable the Mirror Breaker, but now that there's not a whole lot of Orcish Bowmasters running around anymore, it's not as much of a liability to play Fable instead of Seasoned Pyromancer.
Yeah, we saw a lot more Fable of the Mirror Breaker uh, when Indomitable Creativity was still a force in Modern. That deck's kind of fallen off, and it looks like we are seeing a surgical extraction here.
Yeah, I think the target was probably Summoner's Pact, but I haven't really gotten confirmation based on game actions.
Looks like the Pyroclasm did indeed come in. At least one Scape Shift remaining in the deck as well. And yeah, Summoner's Pact was the find.
Now, this is a weird corner case, but Surgical Extraction doesn't actually remove the card from the graveyard. And this happens every now and then where you take the thing and you leave one in the graveyard. It doesn't happen very often. But Surgical Extraction is really weird like that. And if you say, hey, that resolves, and your opponent doesn't pull it from the graveyard, it stays in the graveyard.
Yeah, kind of a weird old templating there. Gotta be especially careful with that one on Magic Online.
That's
and
true.
you only gotta learn that lesson once.
Oh, yeah. When you take all your opponent's Atraxas and then, well, there's still an Atraxa hang out in the graveyard?
Yeah,
Oh,
that
no.
Goryo's Vengeance
Oh, no.
resolved? What
Oh,
are you
no.
talking about?
All right, well, Moscow does have multiple Primeval Titans in hand. Doesn't have access to 6 mana yet, even with the Amulet of Vigor, so going to pass it back to Deshaun, and now Fable of the Mirror Breaker is active. Chapter 2, pigeon some cards, going to help shape our hand. Is this a keep? Is this a keep all?
I'm pretty sure Deshaun's just thinking through what he wants to do with this trigger. Um, if this is a keep all, that's a pretty scary. But I would imagine the best option for Deshaun here is to try to find a Blood Moon, although I believe there still is a Force of Vigor hanging out in Josh Moscow's hand.
Yeah, and that's something that Deshaun probably knows about too, unless it was drawn this turn after the surgical extraction, but I don't think that's true.
Yeah, I think Deshaun did cast that Surgical in the draw step.
Okay, so we should have perfect information about that force. Now, the Fable is a pretty juicy target, but it's not enough to warrant a 2-for-1 on yourself, I don't think. And so, Blood Moon is the card that Moscow is most afraid of and will be saving that Force of Vigor for more than likely.
Yeah, Josh still a mana short next turn of deploying Primeval Titan. Does have a bounce land in hand that we did see, but it looks like we're going to see an exert of this Arena of Glory with red mana floating to cast a Ragavan. That'll trigger the Guide of Souls. Deshaun up to 18 and 2 energy.
See if he has anything else to do with this red mana, or just wants to pseudo dash the Ragavan without having the dash mechanic.
Yeah, we'll have some amount of mana left over. Should be generating a treasure from the Goblin attack as well, so it might not be that worried about the arena remaining exerted, and it looks like that will indeed be the play.
Okay, so here is one treasure from the Fable token. Ragavan also connecting. Going to keep the spawn around so we can have an extra mana next turn. Top card, I believe, was Escape Shift again. get a second treasure, so we still have access to 3 mana here if we have something to play. He only discarded a plane, so it has to be at least one spell in hand that's worthwhile.
Yeah, and presumably one that is kept up with this 3 mana. That could be something like a Thraben Charm, could be Wear Tear out of the sideboard. A lot of options here, but Galvanic Discharge going to go after that spawn token, which would have represented 6 mana with the bounce land that's known in Josh's hand.
And you may be thinking, oh, why doesn't he gain some energy off of the Galvanic Discharge? Well, Moscow choosing to sacrifice that token with its ability, which ultimately counters the Galvanic Discharge, and no energy is gained.
Yeah, it's just going to be a pass back after deploying an Odawara for Josh Moscow. This pressure is mounting.
Yeah, we have a big attack coming. Any creature pre-combat too also allows for... Oh, I guess we don't even need it because the Fable comes in. And so now we have the ability to jump with the Guide of Souls. So right now we got 2, 4, 5 damage coming, 7 if we pay the 3 energy. Moscow at 13 going to go down to 6 if there's no responses.
Yeah, that was a spot where it might have been advantageous for Josh to deploy the Force of Vigor in response to the Transform trigger to keep Deshaun off of that energy, but it doesn't look like the God of Souls was used anyway.
No, and to me that's a pretty big telegraph that Deshaun has another Galvanic Discharge in hand because now he has the ability to pay 6 energy. Otherwise, you're definitely going to be spending that energy for damage output. All right, Simic Growth Chamber is the land. Now that gives us access to 6 this turn for Primeval Titan, and we're going to cast it. Only 1 Amulet of Vigor in play, though, so I don't think that Moscow can actually kill this turn, but we can maybe do some serious damage here anyway.
Yeah, 1 Amulet of Vigor does mean that if this first trigger resolves, which it looks like it will, Josh can deploy the second Titan, because he can get Lotus Fields. He could get 2 of them, and choose to deploy the second Titan, but we'll see if that is what he opts to go for.
All right, so Titan in. Looking for lands is Josh Moscow. He's looking for lands in all the wrong places.
Now, getting double Lotus Field here certainly would come with a significant cost. Other options Josh has is perhaps to get the Hanweir Battlements in conjunction with another red source to haste up this Titan. But he is staring down a lot of pressure on the other side. So if he does opt to go for that line and gets punished by the Galvanic Discharge, that would be lethal coming back across for Deshaun.
All right, well, he is thumbing 2 Lotus Fields to the front, so he's kind of aware of the dangers of letting Deshaun get in with those creatures if this last card in hand is the second Galvanic Discharge. 2 Lotus Fields will require a big sacrifice of lands. 4 lands would go to the graveyard.
Yeah, and what's also notable here is that Summoner's Pact is no longer in the deck, which means Josh cannot get an Aftermath Analyst strictly through his Primeval Titan lines. That is definitely notable because he has the Shifting Woodland already in play and would have access to the full combo if he were to find the Aftermath Analyst.
All right, well, Moscow maybe got to take a different line. I see him pull Simic Growth Chamber to the front. If he grabs that one, he's not going to have enough mana to cast Titan. But he does have enough mana to channel Odawara, if that's what he wants to do. He does need to make a decision. He has been taking quite some time on this one. All right, 1 Lotus Field in. All right, I don't think Moscow is sure what to do, and so Looks like we're going to go for Vesuva and Lotus Field. Correct me if I'm wrong, that Vesuva cannot copy Lotus Field, right?
No, you're absolutely correct. It's because both of them are entering the battlefield at the same time. The Vesuva can only choose things that are already in, and it looks like
he,
it's copying an Arena of Glory.
that is hot. That's hot.
And there is the Galvanic Discharge. Josh does now have the ability to Otawara any permanent should he choose. But then, since he chose to copy that Arena of Glory, he's going to have access to a hasty Primeval Titan next turn. So we'll see what this next turn does hold. I believe Deshaun Johnson is operating off the top.
Yeah, but this is a surveil, so he gets a little bit of help. He has a ton of mana at his disposal, including the ability to cast and give Flage haste. With the Otawara threatening to bounce something, we got 2, 4, 6, 7 damage in play. We could potentially clone Guide of Souls to potentially get more energy. Moscow could bounce the Guide of Souls in response to that.
Yeah, and there's still that Force of Vigor that's available as well. So, depending on what the mill is and what he chooses to do, it looks like he's chosen to leave the card on top. We'll see what it is.
All right, so he draws it for turn. First order of business for Deshaun. Looks like he's thinking about activating Fable. And he does. Let's see what he targets. My guess would be Guide of Souls, but we're going to go after the Goblin token, and it's going to take a bounce from Otawara. So no copy, no token attack. Now what?
If this card is Flage, this is lethal. We would imagine that Flage would have been put into the graveyard off that surveil. But we will see what the card is. Hanweir Battlement's going away, but
don't need that one anymore.
No, not necessary any longer with that Vesuva copying Arena of Glory.
So what is this last card for Deshaun if he kept it on top of the deck? Is it Thraben Charm?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking as well.
Yeah. Thraben Charm it probably is. Any creature would have been cast. Galvanic Discharge, not enough. He knows about the second Primeval Titan. No need to keep Surgical Extraction unless you fire it off there. Moscow doing some quick maths. He has red off a Lotus Field. We can go red, and then the Vesuva copying Arena of Glory can make more red that gives haste, and then we can cast a hasted Primeval Titan.
Yeah, it looks like red's going to be generated off of that Crumbling Vestige.
Okay, and this is going to exert it. And then Lotus Field gets tapped as well. And here's Primeval Titan. Deshaun's going to say, Wear Terror. With that on the stack, that's going to blow up Amulet of Vigor. And now Primeval Titan can go get 2 lands, but they will not enter untapped.
Yeah, I think what we'll likely see here is Josh get a bounce land and a Boseiju, because that will allow him to Boseiju the Reflection of Kiki-Jiki, and maintain his ability to play into the next turn.
Okay. And there's not enough energy on Deshaun's side of things to jump with Guide of Souls, so the defensive nature of Primeval Titan 6/6 body is going to come into play. Normally, Guide of Souls doesn't really care about opposing blockers, but we had to spend 6 energy on a Galvanic Discharge earlier to kill a Primeval Titan.
Yeah, so Deshaun is really hoping to find something that would give him multiple bodies here. I think perhaps something like a Johnny would be an excellent draw. Flage would be lights out immediately, as Deshaun does have the ability to cast and escape it.
Moscow here may want to just set up for following turns as well and go get like Urza Saga, but that's only if he wants to play the Force of Vigor this turn. But with his land drop already being played and the amulet gone, it's going to be difficult for him to hardcast Force, so he'd have to have another green card to pitch.
Right, and we know he doesn't have it. His hand, I believe, is Force of Vigor, Echoing Deeps, and Urza's Saga. So doesn't have the green card to pitch cast the Force. and I don't think he can let the reflection live. If he does, that opens up a lot more outs for Deshaun. A Johnny then would generate two bodies, and if Deshaun were to copy the Guide of Souls, cast the Johnny, that would be enough to force through lethal as well.
Josh taking one last look, trying to figure out what to get exactly. He finds Talaria West, but that's not going to do much because we know that there's no more Summoners packs in the deck, so maybe Josh forgetting about that Surgical Extraction from earlier.
Josh taking some liberties here to decide on his line, and it looks like it is going to be the Boseiju plus Bounce Land.
Okay. He does need to target the reflection now, though, or at least somewhat quickly. If he waits until the upkeep, it's going to target the Guide of Souls and generate some extra advantage.
Yeah, both elegant parlors for Deshaun Johnson already in play as well, so he's not going to get any information after being able to find another Surveil land off of the Boseiju either.
All right, so Seiju back to hand for Moscow. Primeval Titan finished resolving, and I believe we are about to kill the reflection. He needs to do it now. I don't know why he's taking so long. One of those things you'll see in Magic is people thinking while they're shuffling, and they kind of get lost in their thinking while they're shuffling and shuffle for too long.
We are going to see an attack here with the Primeval Titan that was hasted off the Arena of Glory.
Okay, so he's really wasted my time now.
And it looks like this is going to be probably the double Urza Saga get that you described earlier.
Yeah, it could also go get Mirror Pool and maybe make another Primeval Titan with it next turn as a blocker. Alright, well, instead, Crumbling Vestige to get a mana, and a basic force to play around Blood Moon. 6 damage coming across. And Force of Vigor with the Crumbling Vestige mana. That actually is a really nice play from Moscow. Gonna save the Boseiju for a future target. Back Deshaun's way, down to 12. Can he find a red creature to put into play with haste? Is there anything even to play with haste here that can win the game off of Arena of Glory other than Flage?
I believe Voice of Victory would also be lethal.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What is it, Deshaun?
Doesn't look like he found it.
All right, down to 2 life. Josh Moscow reveals Amulet of Vigor. Not very many of those left in the deck. Moscow just at 2 life, but I think we might see another hasted Primeval Titan next turn. Good chance.
Well, this Shifting Woodland that's in play is active. So this could just be Shifting Woodland, copy Primeval Titan that's already in the graveyard.
Attack
and
for 12.
that would be 12.
Okay. Let's see if that's what Moscow sees and goes for.
He picked up a Pyroclasm.
Well, that makes it easy, because that solves all your problems.
Yep.
Animate to become Primeval Titan. Deshaun has Surgical Extraction in response.
He's going to reactivate the Shifting Woodland, though.
Oh, no. We can go again. We can do it again in response. And Deshaun shakes his head, sees the mistake, and this is going to be all she wrote. Deshaun about to get beat here. On the precipice, Josh Moscow with Amulet Titan defeats Deshaun Johnson on Boros Energy, moving to 6-1. Likely going to be one of our top seeds in the top 8 and going to be on the play for most or all of his matches in the top 8.